he was from Iraq. And when he was a child, they were persecuting Jews. They didn't have the same rights. None of the Arab countries surrounding gave Jews the same rights. They looked at them as lower. And his family had to leave very abruptly in order to save their lives. And they ended up going to Israel right after Israel became a country. So, everyone's just been spread out.
Now, I don't know, we talked about it since you and I talked earlier, but my understanding is your family in particular, you were living in Iran. And after the Shah fell, y'all, some of the viewers here probably remember the Shah of Iran when they had their uprising. I think it was 1979, where the Shah was deposed. At that point, your family, I'm assuming your parents, your grandparents, whatever, they moved to Israel at that time. Is that correct?
Well, they moved from Iraq, but it was the same sort of situation.
I'm sorry, Iraq, but it was no,
Exactly.
that's what we're talking. I want to make sure I understand your story. But at that time, it was a safety issue, essentially, right? The persecution. So your family moved to Israel first. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then you, what you were telling me, it was you and your parents moved to America at that time.
So I was born in the US. My parents moved in the 90s. At that
Okay.
point, they just moved to, kind of give us better opportunities, start a life in America. But at that time, so back, in the 40s and everything, or yeah, when Israel was created, all of the Jews within Muslim countries surrounding had no choice but to up and go to Israel because they were starting to persecute Jews at that point more severely. So the Holocaust obviously, stopped just in time, but it was spreading to the Middle East right before World War II ended. So that was already starting. And then Israel was created. So they sent planes to all these different countries and picked up, planes full of Jews, brought them to the homeland. And so that's kind of that's how my family got there. At the same time, my mother's side, her family's from Romania, so they're part of the diaspora Jews that were split up and sent over to that area. They came back for the same reason. They didn't have the same rights. There was a lot of just trouble getting the same opportunities as Jews over there. So they came to the homeland as well. And my mother was also born in Israel.
One of the points that I want to drill down on is the fact that Israel occupied that same land first. Is that
Yes.
your understanding? Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
When we look at our Christian Bible, I believe people that practice Judaism call it the Torah, at least the four, I believe it's the four books of the Old Testament. I'm not a religious scholar, but I'm just making sure everybody understands how this flows. Israel, the land of Israel, was promised to the Jews by God himself. He told Abraham that this will be your land for all time.
Right.
Is
right? Yeah, the Torah refers to Israel multiple times throughout. It's something that's talked about in the Torah, and that's the oldest scroll we have to date. So, if you just look at that, like that is proof right there. But even when they there's the big mosque that's in Israel was built on top of the first temple. So there's archaeological evidence too, besides just the Torah. There's so much evidence.
Now, when we talk about the first temple, and again, I'm not a historian. I'll probably mess this up, but my understanding is that first temple that you're referring to, that was built by King David, right?
Yes.
Or was it his father, King Solomon? I know there was 2 or 3 different temples, but my point is, the Jews have had claim to this land, rightfully so, for a long time, way before any individuals of Arabian descent ever stepped foot in that region. Is that correct? Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. Now, we hear all the time through the mainstream press something to do with they were there first. And that's just a lie. That's just a bold-faced lie. The Jews have been in that land. Now, I'm not sure exactly when in history the nation of Israel stopped, if you will. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but it is the fact that the United Nations reconstituted the area we call Israel today, the nation of Israel, right after World War II, in large part because of the Holocaust. They wanted the Jewish people to, rightly so, have a land that is theirs. Is that correct? Or talk to me about that.
Yes, that's pretty much the exact reason. They knew at that point after the Holocaust that Jews needed a place where they were safe to basically the right to self-determination, which is what Zionism is. They have the right to be Jewish without fear of persecution. And it only made sense at that point to basically create that homeland within their original homeland. So with that area being uncharted territory, they basically just cut those borders and then created the state of Israel out of that.
It's kind of amazing. I've always thought of it, and I want to tell my viewers, I never really realized this till I was older in my life. It is truly what I believe to be a modern day miracle of God that you had the nation of Israel that existed, obviously, in the time of Christ, as we read in the Bible.
Mhm.
It stopped for whatever reason in history. I'm sure that it was some type of conquering at some point. But fast forward roughly 2,000 years later, and the nation of Israel has been reborn
Yeah,
as
exactly.
God promised. Hell, it
Right.
gets me choked up thinking about it. To be honest with you, I mean, it's truly a modern day miracle. It's almost unbelievable to think it happened, and it's been that large of a gap of
Yeah.
time. It just shows God is faithful to
Mhm.
His promises, and that's wonderful. I want to talk again about the individuals that are currently existing in the Gaza Strip. Let's talk about what happened, and you fill in the blanks here. Essentially, when Israel was formed again, the Arabian forces, as you were talking about in the 6 Day War, they basically told the Arabs that were living there, hey, we're coming through with our armies. You had Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, I think Iraq,
Mhm.
and what else did I miss there? There
Iran.
was five. Okay, yeah, it was like 5 or 6 nations. They were like, hey, we're coming through with our armies and we're going to slaughter every man, woman, and child. And we want to know the Jews from the Arabs. So to make it easier for us, we want you to pack up and scoot quickly. And they ended up in the Gaza Strip. And then, as you pointed out, rightfully so, the armies never materialized. Israel was able to whoop all those nations in the 6 Day War that
Yeah.
we were just discussing. So that's kind of where that right of return comes in that you sometimes hear about. Is that also correct? Okay.
Right.
Where they talk about they want to go back to their homes and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But the reality is they left their homes
Mhm. Exactly.
and fleeing. Okay. All right. I just want to make sure everybody kind of understands how this is all laid out. Basically, the individuals that are currently in Gaza, they're Jordanian. Is that also correct?
Yes.
Why
Yeah.
do you not think they simply don't take the people that live in Gaza and repatriate them in Jordan?
So some of the refugees did return to Jordan when they told them to leave. They returned to Jordan because in reality the people who lived in that area at that time were Jordanians and Syrians and everybody in the surrounding areas that was living there for work. They worked there, they kind of created their homes there. So when they told them to leave, not most of them, but a good chunk of them did return back to those countries. So the biggest issue was that in Jordan as well as in Lebanon, they tried to overthrow the government. And it's a very radicalized group of people that tried to do it, but that was people who are now considered Palestinians. And so they were kicked out, essentially. And so now that this war is happening, people are continuously putting the blame on Israel when if you really think about it, they could easily open the borders to Egypt and all of those surrounding countries and they could take them back in. But from experience and what happened the last time they did, they refused because they don't want to bring any more trouble within their countries.
Yeah, in reality, they could solve this problem quickly by simply taking all these residents that are considered refugees in Gaza and move them into Egypt or Jordan or split them up between all the different Arabian countries. But the reality is, especially Egypt, they don't want these people because they view them as radical terrorists. So their own people, their own Arabian people, if you will, they don't want these individuals because they know they are bad. What say you?
Yeah, pretty much exactly. And also another reason that they are refugees is because in those countries, the people that stayed, they have still to this day not been given the same rights that other civilians have. So, if they were to open up those borders and bring them in and give them those same civilian rights, give them citizenship to those countries and return their citizenship, really, I think that this, wouldn't be even something we're talking about right now. So, I think that a lot of the blame does end up falling on those countries as well.
I think something else I want to mention is the fact that the government of Hamas is there is because the people in Gaza elected
Yes.
Hamas. and they continue to elect Hamas. So, in that sense, the residents of the Gaza Strip are really not innocent per se, in the sense that they are overwhelmingly supported and reelected. They keep electing the same Hamas officials time
Right.
and time again.
Hmm. Yeah,
Correct?
absolutely. I mean, in 1967, before 1967, I would say, they were peacefully coexisting. And then in 1967, there was what's called the Yom Kippur War, where the Gazans attacked again, and a lot of surrounding countries attacked as well. And this was on what's considered the holiest holiday of Judaism. So no one was prepared. It was a complete surprise attack. And after that, you get into the first Intifada, where Gazans were coming to Israel and essentially just performing terrorist acts and causing
Now,
chaos.
now, let me slow you down just a bit. What exactly is an intifada? Just briefly.
Intifada means violent revolution.
Okay.
So basically, what it was is them trying to essentially, part two of the Six-Day War, trying to get rid of the Jews.
It's just
They
another. It's kind of like an uprising, a violent uprising
exactly.
to take out Israel. Okay.
Right. So at that point, when they were, peacefully coexisting, they were coming in. They bombed buses. They stabbed people in the street. There was a lot of violence and chaos. And that is when, essentially, 1967, when the occupation started. So that is when Israel said, okay, if you guys can't peacefully coexist, we're going to shut off this border so we can protect our own. And we're going to come over there and settle and make sure people are doing, just keeping them in check. But then, you get to 2005, and at that point, Israel decided, okay, the government at that time decided, okay, let's remove the occupation, let's get people out of Gaza, and they can handle themselves, and we'll just try to create a peaceful solution by leaving those settlements and taking back our settlements back to Israel. And at that point, when they no longer had a government, they weren't part of Israel's government, or Israel wasn't governing them anymore, that's when they elected Hamas. And every time they keep re-electing Hamas. And personally, I do think there are Palestinians out there that do want peace, that don't support Hamas. But the second that they're even think about speaking about that, they're instantly murdered. So we don't even know if they exist or where they exist. I mean,
That's a
there's
good
no
point.
rights. Yeah, they're not allowed to speak against their government
Yeah,
anymore.
and on my channel here, I talk a lot about indoctrination. I encourage everybody to think for themselves. Don't believe something because I tell you or anybody tells you. Hear what you need to hear and make up your own mind. Do your own research. Do your own checking of the facts. But in relation to the prospect of peace in the Gaza Strip, is it not the case that they essentially teach the children from a very young age that Jews are bad, you need to kill Jews, and this is ingrained. It's a severe type of indoctrination, and it happens from kindergarten all the way up.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, from the time that they're able to speak, that's what they're telling them. They have, history books from, they have the Mein Kampf, they study that in school, and they have school plays for kindergarteners.
And the Mein Kampf, that's a book written by
Hitler.
Hitler. That's right. Okay.
Yeah. So they have all of this, Nazi propaganda that they're learning in schools as fact. And, there's videos of kindergarten school plays where they're shooting the Jews and talking about how evil the Jews are.